So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this second session of the pre-conference webinar of the SINA conference. And today we are talking about defense in partnership with the Ludovica University. So I will now leave the floor to the chair of the webinar, Mr. Bill Emmott, that will now introduce both the speakers and the introducer and chair the discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Antonio, and I repeat your welcome to this Vision and Value webinar, pre-conference webinar for the Siena Conference on the Future of Europe, and we are devoted to talking about defense. It's billed as defense and welfare. My personal view, to put that in straight away, is that without defense there would be no welfare. And I think that Ukraine has been proving that for the last 4 years. But so that it's not a clear trade-off. But of course, when you come to defense spending of countries that are not at war, that is the way the politics of the trade-off can feel. That is what we're here to discuss. The only other point I'm going to make, perhaps because I'm a just stood down former chair of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, very conscious of the fact that really, although we talk about defense and defense budgets and strategic autonomy and all of the things like that, actually, if you are a nation and a region that does not have offensive ambitions, then the purpose of defense is essentially deterrence. And the right question for us all to keep in our minds as we're thinking about capabilities and processes and how to organize ourselves is what is required to deter our adversary, which I think we can agree is Russia, our adversary from taking aggressive actions against us or attempting something provocative. It's really to be measured against that defense spending needs to be thought about, rather than some broad comparison, in my view, with the capabilities offered by the United States, sometimes withdrawn by the United States under the current administration. Can we deter Russia from attacks on any of the European Union or of European NATO members? That, I think, is what we have to keep fundamentally in mind. And as we do so, we are helped by a paper from the Ludovica University for Public Service in Budapest. And we are going to open this webinar with the presentation of that paper by Ambassador Csaba Zsalai and his colleague Anna, who he says is the prime expert on the paper. And they are going to be introduced by Liliana Smiech, the Director General for International Relations at the Ludovica University. We then have 4 excellent discussions to respond to the paper. So Liliana, why don't you open by...
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill, for this nice introduction. And I believe all of the issues that you just mentioned would be... oh, sorry, you can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So all of the issues that you probably raised would be later on also developed by our 2 great colleagues. So let me introduce the researchers that actually worked on the paper. Professor Anna Molnar, who is professor at the Ludovica University of Public Service and head of the Department of International Security Studies, and Ambassador Csaba Zsalai, who is a professor of practice at the Ludovica University of Public Service and head of the International Organizations Research Group. And just 2 brief words about the Ludovica itself. A very unique institution on the not just the European, but I would say global map. We are training future public servants, military officers, policemen, teachers, and water sciences experts, and all of them are trained under one rooftop, so that they are trained for the future to work together if certain challenge appears on the agenda. So I'm not gonna take more of your time, and I'm gonna give the floor to Csaba to start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Liliana, and thank you, Bill, and dear colleagues. It's a pleasure to contribute to this discussion on the future of European defense. I don't need to introduce myself, but I nevertheless would like to say that I'm presenting this joint paper drafted together with my colleague Anna Molnar. So I'm speaking on behalf of Anna and also under her control, and she will obviously come in after my presentation. The title of our paper is "How much does defending ourselves really cost?" And obviously the starting point of our paper is quite simple, yet increasingly unavoidable. The security environment of Europe has fundamentally changed, and with this also the assumptions underpinning our defense model. It is obvious that since the end of the Cold War, European security rested on three main pillars: a stable security order, economic interdependence, and the strong US security guarantees. And today, all of these three pillars are under pressure. Obviously, we all have witnessed this with the return of high-intensity war to our continent, with the unfortunate aggression of Russia into Ukraine in the last 4 years, but also with the weaponization of trade, with Liberty Day, we can remember last year, but also weaponization of technology and energy, and the increasing geopolitical rivalry. And these obviously have a big question mark also about the uncertainty about the long-term US engagement. And these all have exposed structural vulnerabilities in Europe's defense and our industrial capacity. And this basically leads us to the first crucial question, which we are examining in a paper. Who do we need to defend ourselves against? And obviously, the answer is no longer limited to Russia, even though, as Bill rightly said, Russia remains an immediate and an existential military threat to us. But Europe faces a much broader and more complex threat landscape. We talk about China in a paper, which is obviously not a direct military adversary of us, but it is a growing strategic threat by dominating a number of different strategic areas, ranging from critical supply chains to technologies, but also due to the strengthening of the Russian-Chinese alliance. And we also talk about in our paper about geoeconomic coercion. Again, here I repeat what I've just said. Here, trade, investment, or raw materials are used as strategic tools. And unfortunately, our closest ally, the US, especially under President Trump, has also used this as leverage. And this is creating a source of strategic uncertainty for us. And not forgetting the regional instability across the neighborhood of ours. Think of the Middle East, but also in regions in North Africa, but also the region of Central Asia or the Caucasus. These are all instable regional neighborhoods of ours. And last but not least, we also touch upon hybrid threats, including things such as cyber attacks, disinformation, but there are a growing number of non-state actors who also disrupt with AI technologies, but also other technological disruptions. So this basically brings us to the important conceptual question: are we preparing for a single adversary or for a systematic environment of overlapping risk where militarily, economic, and technological domains are intertwined? And obviously, our paper adopts the latter view. We basically underline that economic security has become national security, and defense policy must reflect obviously this. We are departing with a number of core assumptions. First, we talk about European strategic autonomy. This used to be a political slogan 10 years ago, but this has basically become a strategic. necessity these days because of the threats I've mentioned before. But we are not using this goal in order to replace NATO or the US, but basically for Europe to become stronger and more capable pillar within the transatlantic alliance. So basically, Europe needs to have the capacity to decide, the capability to act, and the resilience to withstand external shocks. That's one of the main assumptions that we depart from. Number two, the challenge facing Europe is not simply just to spend more when we talk about defense, but it's also about how to spend it. We need to spend it better, faster, and obviously together, all of the member states. Decades of fragmentation, duplication, and underinvestment have led basically to inefficiencies that weaken Europe's overall defense posture. And number three, we basically argue that defense can no longer be treated in isolation. Security, economic competitiveness, technological sovereignty, and resilience are all deeply interconnected, making defense policy a central component of Europe's broader strategic transformation. Now, this basically brings us to the second key question. How much defense Europe actually needs, and what will it cost? And we here again depend from the relevant current picture and the data. And we can see from the relevant EU defense spending that it has been increasing for the last decade. And it has reached last year roughly around 392 billion euros, which is about 2.1% of the EU's total GDP. This is obviously according to the European Defence Agency. But if we widen the picture and we include also the European NATO members, then the total that is spent on military defense spending, is roughly 500 billion euros in 2025. Which is, again, if we look at the broader picture, this is roughly 60% of what the US spent last year. And this is obviously 3 times as much as Russia has spent. And this is roughly 1.7 times more than China spends. Obviously, these are total numbers, not talking about military and research and development. But nevertheless, it gives us this picture that there is a strongly increasing military spending in Europe, something that has not been seen in the last 70 years. And if we add to that the political decisions that we have taken as NATO member states, which we took last year, which is basically that we have pledged ourselves to reach 5% of GDP security-related spending by 2035. And if we add to that all the EU programs that help us to finance all these political segments, including the Readiness 2030 framework, which envisages roughly around 18 billion euros to additional defense-related investments. But also, if we add to that the long-term EU budget, which dedicates also roughly around 140 billion euros to defense, including space and security, then we come to the realization that this figure, this overall defense spending, should be probably significant and also sufficient for creating credible defense. We also cite one or two analyses which come from the angle that with roughly around 3% of GDP, the European Union, but also the 30 European NATO member states would be able to cater for our defense in the midterm, even under scenarios of reduced US engagement. So that's about basically how much we need to spend in the medium term on our defense. But basically our main finding in our paper is that the challenge of Europe is not primarily financial. It is more structural and strategic. We need much more coordination. We need joint procurement. We need industrial scaling. and we need spending levels which we can basically achieve these required technologies. And this brings us basically to the third questions that we are elaborating in our paper, and this is about the role of technology. And here we come to issues such as the modern warfare, which is increasingly shaped by data, algorithms, autonomy, and connectivity. States that lack access to AI, cyber capabilities, or advanced sensors will obviously face significant disadvantages in intelligence, targeting, or decision making. But again, at the same time, as we are witnessing in the war in Ukraine, but also in the Middle East, relatively low-cost technologies, especially drones, are transforming warfare to a great extent. These conflicts in Ukraine and Middle East have shown that drones can offset conventional military weakness. They can increase the asymmetry of warfare, and there are obviously can significantly reduce the cost of projecting force. And obviously, in the case of Iran, we can see another additional facts. It shows that mid-level technological capabilities can also generate strategic impact, and even without matching the conventional strength of adversaries. So basically, future defense will be very much determined not only by scale and spending, but also as well by adaptive innovation and technological agility. And here we basically come to the arguments and our proposals. We basically need, as I said, not just more spending, but the smarter defense model, smarter spending. And we propose basically three main directions. Number one, we propose to move towards a genuinely integrated European defense market. Here we talk about the necessity of Europe to reduce fragmentation by strengthening joint procurement, standardization, and industrial consolidation. This includes obviously the creation of a single market for defense and a more coherent European defense technological and industrial base. Number two, we also propose to prioritize strategical capabilities and technological leadership. Investment, in our view, should focus on key areas such as AI, cyber defense, space capabilities, quantum technologies, and advanced manufacturing, all of which are obviously essential not only for defense, but also for economic security. And here, obviously, the European component can have a major impact. And number three, we also suggest that we should develop a sustainable financing and governance models in Europe, obviously helping member states' defense budgets. And here, obviously, such initiatives like the Readiness 2030 and the expansion of the common EU instruments, thinking about the long-term budgetary framework. There are obviously very strong foundations, but we also need long-term better coordination between EU and NATO and stronger alignment of national planning cycle. And finally, we are also briefly looking at the institutional aspect, but this is obviously the most difficult one because this is where we need also political engagement. And here we are talking about flexible integration. We also cite Mario Draghi's idea of pragmatic federalism, which is basically letting member states go ahead in the sort of coalition of willing that we are seeing, but we also pleading to do this not just in the EU framework, but within the non-EU European partners, obviously those not NATO European partners, like involving them like UK and Turkey. So I will basically conclude by saying that compared with 10 years ago, the situation is much more positive. We finally have the political consensus to act. We also seem to have, and we will more so have the financial resources in the middle term to assume greater responsibility for the conventional defense of our continent. and which will obviously include supporting Ukraine on a credible long-term footing. But all will depend on the critical choices that we make. So basically, in a nutshell, the question is not whether Europe will be able to spend more, but whether we can choose the right priorities and build the right capabilities and to act collectively. And we basically argue that we are now in a situation to do so. I stop here and I will let Anna to come in with some additional arguments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And it is really for me also an honor to be here. As I said it before, at the moment I am in Georgia at the National Defense Academy of Georgia in Gori, which is approximately 10 kilometers from South Ossetia. We all know that approximately 20% of this country is controlled by Russia. So here I really can feel that Russian threat, which we are also facing in Europe, but from a distance, different distances, because our country, Hungary, is very close to its neighboring country, to Ukraine, and so the distance is different. But here its feeling is really clear. I teach here CSDP, Common Security and Defense Policy, so it's very actual, I think, also for them. And they cannot join at the moment. It's a very, I wouldn't say that they cannot, but it's a very difficult path for them to join NATO or the European Union in the future, which would be very important for their security. As it was said before, also without defense and security, there is no welfare and development. Without development, there is no security and on the other hand. I would like to just add to the previous thing that today, and as part of the next multi-annual financial framework, the European Union, of course, is supporting member states in spending more effectively and collaboratively on defense sector integration. And based on the experience of previous initiatives in the field of CSDP, because in the last 10 years, the European Union, and maybe pushed by the European Commission, has started to build up the so-called European Defense Union. And based on the previous experience of these initiatives, such as PESCO, CARD, or EDF, those reached some important progress, but were not able to close the so-called capability gaps and create a real defense market, unified defense market in Europe. The new initiatives need long-term funding mechanisms and a better synchronization of national planning processes as well. And it is also important to emphasize the necessity for enhancing synergy between PESCO, and there are again new initiatives like European defense projects of common interest. And the European Commission proposed that the countries implement 4 flagship projects. And in the future, these are also very important, such as the European Drone Defense Initiative, the Eastern Flank Watch, or the Instant Air Shield, and Space Shield as well, considering the creation of pan-European strategic capabilities like an air defense system. Such a project would require adequate policy framework, additional financial instruments, and also political will from the member states, which is very important, because without that, it is very important. It's very difficult to implement all these initiatives. And I would say that that only the creation of, for example, European Air Shield would necessitate the investment of approximately 1,000 billion euros and maybe the duration of 2 decades and political will. mobilization of tens of thousands of engineers and employees, of course, on the other hand. But on the other hand, the examples, for example, of Galileo and Copernicus programs, where the Commission holds full legal ownership of this, could provide a solution to better integration of the defense capabilities in the future. But these are very federalist approaches to defense as well. And without, as I said it before, without the political will of the member states, will be very difficult to realize them. And we also know that the second Trump administration represents the end of the previous special relationship between Europe and the United States. And this also means that it will act as a rival for the European Union as well. But on the other hand, Europe still depends on US security, and that will be very difficult to change it. So I will finish here because I think that my colleague Csaba said almost everything about our paper, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Anna. And we are now halfway through our hour. We have our director from Vision, Francesco Grillo, who has been able to join us and is, I think, in a position just to say a few words. And then I propose to hand over, but first of all, to Yuri Shivala in Kyiv, and then Vincenzo and Yevhen, and give Daniel very much the last word among the discussants. Francesco, would you like to join us?
Yes, thank you very much, Bill. I must say it is one of the most adventurous webinar we ever organized. We are talking about technologies, and technologies do not work when you talk about them. Number two, it's probably even the webinar which has been most beyond the EU. We have people joining us from Georgia, from Ukraine, and basically I will leave it to you, Bill, because you are also beyond the EU, sort of, because you are a UK citizen, although you are in Ireland. You are in great hands, and I really hope that you can also join us physically in Siena, Bill, because this will be probably one of the most important, if not the most important, conversation and possibly paper we will have out of Siena. So thank you very much, and you're very welcome to go ahead. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Francesco. Unfortunately, I'm not able to join you in Siena this year because of a clash, but I very much welcome the discussion of defense. And Ukraine has been acting as a non-NATO, non-EU European defense shield for the last 4 years. So I want to ask Yuri to say, how does this look how does the paper look? How does the perspective look from someone sitting in Kyiv who's been watching events in Kyiv so closely?
Hello once again. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you that such events happening, and Europe is thinking about defending itself without relying on allies who are behind the overseas and have not very stable international and geopolitical approach for the last 1.5 years. The war in Ukraine showed that in general quite dynamic time to live, but when it's war is dynamic as well, because both sides, Ukrainian and Russian sides, are trying to take technological and tactical and strategical advantage on a battlefield. And here in Ukraine, we can watch quite closely how the battlefield has changed because in 2022, it was the war has begun like a regular conventional war with artillery, infantry, mortars, trenches, dugouts, and so on. But quite fast, this competition for technological advantage and for defeating much more bigger power that is attacking Ukraine with much more bigger number of resources, troops, heavy weapons, with the bigger capacities in general. So Ukrainian army should have been created some more creative way to fight. So regular civil Mavic drones to conduct reconnaissance. Quite fast, these drones has been updated and were able to drop small grenades and small shells to the enemy positions. Then the first point of view drones, so-called FPV drones, started to be used by infantry soldiers to hit Russian targets behind the front line because we had the lack of artillery, we had the lack of artillery shells. So without drones, probably Ukraine might have fallen a couple years ago. But we would not talk too much about the history, but about the current battlefield. I prepared quite a big article and sent it to organizers about how all these technologies were developing. So I think you would be able to read it. But now the battlefield, it's not a front line. Front line doesn't exist anymore. It's continuously increasing kill zone, densely populated by different kind of drones, and the estimated how big is this kill zone. So it's about 15-25 kilometers from each side of former front line. And drones are being used not only on the front line. There are drones of the tactical level that hit everything that moves on the actual battlefield. There are drones of operational level that hit on the distances from 50 to 300 kilometers. Something like that was not possible one and a half year ago. But now with developing of the autonomy of drones, you can play the video game just wearing the goggles and flying the toy plane that is made from plywood, for instance, but carrying quite big explosives and hit the supply logistic ways from both sides. And drones of strategical levels, Shahid drones that were known in Ukraine since 2022. Now Ukraine face every week the swarms of drones, 500, 600 deadly drones that are attacking all the territory of Ukraine, and Ukraine also attacking Russia, creating quite huge problems with their economics, destroying the export capacities by our long-range drones that now can fly up to 2,000 kilometers to the Russian rear. And the problem of modern war is that you might never face the tactical level drones or operational level drones that hit up to 3,000 kilometers. But nothing stops for aggressor, for instance, Russia or even Iran, to send drones for very long distances, over 1,000 kilometers, and reaching countries that are far away from the battlefield. We've seen the Russian provocation when they sent decoy drones to the territory of Poland. We've seen that upgraded by Russian-Iranian drone were widely used in the conflict in the Middle East. And to protect countries, to protect Europe from such kind of threat, the conventional air defense would not work for too long, because the price of producing Russian Shahed is averaged $35,000, and Russia can produce hundreds of these drones per week. The price of traditional interceptor, rocket interceptor of IRIS-T system, for instance, the joint system produced by a couple countries of Europe, cost $500,000. And usually to intercept the air target, you have to calculate using of 2 interceptors. So it means $1 million against 1 drone. And if you talk about PAC-3 missiles of the Patriot systems, they cost way more expensive. So if, for instance, if some country X, so country Russia, launch couple weeks in a row 500 drones to some, let's say, unnamed EU country, and if we are using traditional air defense systems, suddenly we will get to the point where we will have lack of interceptors. We would not be able to produce as much interceptors and as fast as Russia can produce cheap drones in very big amount. So I don't say that we don't need, as a European continent, traditional, conventional air defense systems. We need them to shut down sophisticated targets like ballistic missiles, aeroballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and other kind of hypersonic targets that couldn't be hit with some other air defense systems. But for protecting European Union, protecting Europe from cheap but deadly drones like Shahed drones, we need cheap, fast producing and efficient solutions. In 2025, Ukrainian state found out that we cannot rely on supplying traditional interceptors, and the number of Russian drones started to be very big. For instance, on April 1st this year, Russia launched 700 drones just per one night. We might have used all our rockets if we shut down these drones by these assets only. So that's why in 2025, Ukrainian manufacturers started to produce small drone interceptors, FPV drone, like something similar that is being used on a tactical level to hit the regular targets on a battlefield. But these drones are being used to chase the Shahed drone and explode near this drone in air, destroying it and preventing hitting by this drone some targets that Russia aimed by when launched it.
Well, I should stop you now, Yuri, because we've got 3 other discussants and we're running out of time. But that you've really beautifully described the complexity and the difficulty of the defense situation that you face and that Europe very much faces and needs to think about how to plan for. Perhaps I could ask Vincenzo De Luca to come in here. Are you still there, Vincenzo? Yes, you are.
Yes. I followed all the discussion. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Very shortly, I would say to be really more pragmatic on our discussion, also in order to be able to provide some suggestion in the debate in Europe, that certainly is one of the most politically important debate in this period. I think we should we should study a process that is incremental in a way, incremental in the involvement of the member states and European Commission, incremental in the format, both at the industrial side and also on the defense side. And I want to mention a previous effort to integrate European industry that was precisely at the end of the 90s. There was an agreement signed on the year 2000, the framework agreement on the restructuring the defense industry in Europe. This agreement was signed by France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Sweden, and UK. This agreement was also ratified in Italy in 2003, and is a good way to study how to promote now an incremental approach to the integration process. Because in the framework agreement, there was the outcome of high-level political among these countries. They started with a letter at that period signed by President Chirac and President ex-Chancellor Kohl to other European leaders, Blair in UK, Prodi in Italy, Aznar in Spain. The idea was to have a big bang of the European defense industry. The big bang was not possible, but the idea to promote variable alliances in that period was quite successful. Because if you think about EIDS, Airbus, if you think about ATR between Italy and France, or AgustaWestland between Italy and UK, MBDA with EU, UK, Italy, and France, this is a way also to facilitate a sort of restructuring of the European defense industry. I think even more, even now, and Draghi was quite clear about this flexible and practical federalism or incremental approach. We should be able to working not in a medium long term, but starting from now in a coalition of countries that are more available to start this process. There is already a coordination process among the Ministry of Defense of Italy, France, Germany, Poland, and Spain, I think not Spain, was Poland, France, Germany, Italy, and also UK in a way. And this exercise is supposed to be integrated with other member states like Spain and Sweden. I mentioned this first area of countries that have already experiences of discussion on integration, because there are several points that have to be discussed in this exercise. In the framework agreement, for example, there were chapters concerning security of supply, ensuring mutual guarantees for the delivery of defense materials and services between signatory nations. Second, export procedure, simplifying and harmonize national export control and transfer procedure for military goods. Security of information, establishing common standards for classifying, protecting, and exchanging sensitive data. Research and technology. I just want to mention some of the chapters just to tell you how complex is the process, but how important is also to take this experience useful for relaunching a process of incremental integration of the defense industry. At the beginning of this process, there was a letter of intent of the Ministry of Defense and a letter of intent of the Ministers of Industry. And the idea was to create a sort of integrated procurement with integrated and similar requirements, and encouragement to the industry to work together in order to be able to provide products in order to the requirements established by the Ministry of Defense. And also, I think that the defense industry needs to be strongly integrated with the industrial policy, because when we are talking about a European industrial policy, we talk about also the supply to Europe of critical materials that are important both for manufacturing and for defense industry, and also the use of artificial intelligence in a holistic way for enhancing the innovation in the industrial process for the defense industry. So I just wanted very briefly to introduce this previous experience and the way we can work with the first group of countries that could be certainly in a second phase or in a progressive way integrate all the member states, also taking advantage of the new regulation existing in Europe. In my view, UK should be an essential part of this process of the integration of the European industry, considering also the convergence of interests between UK and European states in this difficult challenge of become more independent and having more autonomy in our defense capabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincenzo. And I'm tempted to ask you what you think of the Italian government's removal of Roberto Cingolani as chief executive of Leonardo, and which direction this suggested the Italian government itself was thinking. But I won't, because I'm going to hand over to Yevhen Popov, and then finally to Daniel Gross.
Okay.
Yevhen.
Thanks for this opportunity to speak. I will not probably take much time, and like a few thoughts and reflection on what period we are and what actually are happening right now. And I think the most important thing is to recognize that we right now in the process of military innovation where nobody knows how it will end it. So in the 1938 or 1940s, nobody didn't know that everything will end with nuclear bomb and like the technology development in this sphere. And unfortunately, right now we are the same process. Right now, the situation described with drones is pretty clear, already described by Yuri, with innovation there in this sphere. And like if we will look back at the time 4 years ago, nobody would expect that this innovation would happen, and unfortunately nobody knows how it will end it. So like the tremendous innovation in that sphere is happening right now. Me as a representative as an AI company, we also see that the products in the AI sphere, especially in defense or in military or intelligence, is huge. So we, as one of the most innovative Ukrainian company, we see that like the changes is so dramatic that you need to be so fast in every new step than you was previously. So back in the 2022, we was like not even in the way of understanding how AI will look like as it right now. So, and in the future it will be much more fast, much more adjust, much more comprehensive. And unfortunately in these innovations and in these periods, you don't have the time to build the framework, you don't have the time to build the procurement process, you don't have a time to understand what the challenges really are. And unfortunately, if we will speak in a broader perspective of the Europe, we have multiple voice about what we are really protecting. So, and this is, I guess, as a, again, representative of a company which work with information environments, we still don't understand what really assets are. So some people protecting the lifestyle that used to be in Europe for many years after the Second World War. The other voice is telling, oh, we need to protect our economy. Then the other directions speaking about that the challenges is about elections and democracy as itself, and so on, so on. So multiple voices doesn't give the opportunity to understand what really assets are. And unfortunately, with defense, industry. And unfortunately, if we're speaking about like the broader perspective of what should be protected, and the discussion started here from the prosperity level and so on, this understanding is like it's a key vision of like how to work with military itself, because when you not sure what you're really protecting, it's like you're not sure, you're not investing in the most dominant sphere right now. And unfortunately the challenge is huge. I'm absolutely agree that it's multiple actors among Europe who playing against it. I'm absolutely agree that it's no vision of how to approach each situation, and the danger is big just because the weapons are there, the soldiers is running, and let's be absolutely clear, Russians just want to take not only the lifestyle of Europe as it is, they just want to eliminate kill everybody there, and just to take everything for them, just to live better. So it will be okay for them to destroy everything, and stay at the same economical condition and the lifestyle they're already living for past decades. So yeah, it's probably the better understanding for me, like my understanding for me for the current situation, and it's probably the numbers of challenging we're facing. But yeah, the best way to start and like the best way to approach the situation is just to understand what's the actual assets are and what we're actually protecting. So it will be very philosophical one, but for me it's also important, like when you facing the real problems, because when liars is appearance, it's no defense there, it's just the communications or research. It's not the approach to solve the problem. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Yevhen. So finally, Daniel Gross, you've taken at the Institute of European Policy Making at Bocconi quite a holistic, thoughtful approach to the economics of this. And economists tend not to be very approving of defense spending, since it's essentially consumption for no productive use unless there's some technological spin-offs. How do you see the challenge that have been set by Vision for this conference?
Well, it's of course a big challenge. I would say it's going to be met not by big political commitments, because we have every day big political commitments to more defense union, more unity, common security. And then when they turn home, the only thing about is protect the national champions. Right? We saw that in Italy, we see that in Germany. So in my view, what is going to happen is that most of the spending goes on national champions. Even in Germany, where you had 90% going to Rheinmetall. But, and I think that's the key issue, given the speed of innovation in Ukraine, I think more and more ministries of defense will realize that if they are not, or say, learning from that experience, cooperating with Ukrainian producers, they're going nowhere. You mentioned at the very beginning, Bill, that the key issue is not so much substitute the Americans, but deterrence. Right? Now, deterrence is a bit in the mind of Putin, so it's difficult to read. But effective deterrence has certainly to be able to be at least as efficient as the Ukrainians. And now, what countries in Europe will learn from that? Those who actually finance Ukraine. Right? And there's a very strict, very sharp north, south, northwest, northeast, southwest divide. And I think only when Italy and France and Spain wake up and see that their national champions might have some particular technology, but it's being outdated very soon, will they actually start to spend something more usefully. Most European champions right now prefer to be a big fish in a small national pond. But since the pond is changing and Ukraine is defining what's actually the frontier, I think that's the only way to get some integration in European military spending via Kiev, basically. And of course, the enterprises, the firms from Western Europe that invest there, co-produce, they are the ones who are going to be the winner in the long run. Maybe even ones that start with lots of metal bashing, but maybe they can learn a few tricks. And I think that is what is going to be the essence of the game, not so much the big European pronouncements. Anyway, what the EU does directly is marginal. The EU budget cannot be spent on military stuff.
Yes.
And the EU has just given some loans, which are nice. The biggest beneficiary is Hungary. But apart from that, it cannot actually do a lot. These are national decisions. And I hope that there's some of Darwinian process working, that the most efficient spending will win out in the end. I apologize also because I have to leave now in a minute.
Thank you very much, Daniel. That was a marvelous roundup and sealing a point to seal the discussion. I'm going to ask Francesco swiftly to say thank you on behalf of Vision and to finish the seminar and to allow you all to go off to your dinner or whatever you have to do. Francesco, where are you?
Thank you so much, Bill. I'm very sorry that I couldn't properly contribute to the discussion, but it was super. I see a tension between who must innovate out of necessity, like our great friends from Ukraine, and us, ourselves, who can still afford to still not wake up, as Daniel rightly said. I really think we, in a sense, Europe needs Ukraine as much as Ukraine needs Europe. We need your urgency, your in and out of necessity. And this is something that we want to elaborate in Siena. And I really hope this webinar will be useful, especially to our friends from Ludovica University, to better your paper, to make it sharper, because the very objective of the conference is to have follow-ups and to have some real ideas, some proposal to be possibly even achieved in a not in a short term time, because we do not have that much time. So thank you very much, and thanks to you, Bill, once again.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you to everybody, and good luck with all of your essential work. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Bill.
gentlemen.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.